What happens when a test of love becomes the reason a marriage ends? I thought making my husband jealous would prove how much he cared. Instead, I got a lawyer's letter and learned too late that his silence wasn't weakness. I used to think love needed testing, like if you didn't shake it once in a while, it would go stale. My name's Maribel Dorsey. I'm 33, and I thought I understood marriage. Liam, my husband, is the kind of man who never raises his voice, never forgets a bill, never argues. People called him dependable. I called him distant. He'd come home from work, kiss my forehead, and go straight to his laptop. I'd try to talk about my day, and he'd nod without really hearing me. It felt like being married to a shadow, safe, predictable, and endlessly dull. I used to tell myself I wanted peace, but peace turned out to be boring. I wanted fire. I wanted to see if he'd fight for me the way men do in movies, the way they're supposed to when they're afraid of losing something they love. So when his best friend, Jordan, started joking around one night, telling me I looked too young to be someone's wife already, I laughed a little too long. I saw Liam look up just once, and I felt that spark again, that flicker of attention I'd been missing. It should have ended there, a harmless moment. But something in me liked it, the power, the tension, the control. I told myself I was just proving a point, that men only value what they fear losing. I didn't plan to hurt him. I just wanted to see if he cared enough to stop me. Now, looking back, I can see how fast that one test turned into a disaster. The night I flirted with his friend, I thought I was in control. By the time I understood what I'd started, Liam wasn't angry. He was gone. And somehow, that silence hurt worse than any fight ever could. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It started small, the kind of restlessness you can't name. Every evening felt the same. The clock, the quiet, the sound of Liam rinsing his coffee mug before bed. He wasn't cruel, just absent. We'd talk about bills, errands, schedules, but never about us. I'd try to tease him, ask what he'd do if I ran away with someone else. He'd smile politely and say, "You won't." That confidence used to feel comforting. Then it started to feel like a cage. The night everything shifted was a Friday. Liam's friend Jordan came over for dinner, just the three of us. They worked together years ago, stayed close ever since. Jordan was louder, funnier, looser, the opposite of Liam in every way. He joked easily, complimented my cooking, made conversation feel alive. When he laughed, he looked right at me. Liam just sat back, listening like an observer. At one point, Jordan said something like, "You know, Maribel, you don't seem like a teacher. Too lively for that job." I laughed and said maybe I just liked attention. Liam didn't react. He kept eating, eyes on his plate. I watched him, waiting for a flicker of emotion. Anything. Nothing. Later, when Liam got up to take the dishes, Jordan leaned closer and said quietly, "You two are so different. I don't know how you do it." I told him we balanced each other out. He said, "Or maybe you're bored." He said it lightly, but it hit deep. I didn't answer. I smiled instead, pretending not to care. When Jordan left, I asked Liam if he'd noticed how flirty his friend was. He said Jordan was always like that. I told him it didn't bother me, that it was nice to be noticed. He just nodded, said, "If that's what you need." I stared at him, angry at his calmness. I said, "You don't even care, do you?" He said, "I trust you." The way he said it, steady, emotionless, felt worse than indifference. I wanted him to react, to get angry, to fight. He didn't. That's when the idea formed, half impulse, half challenge. I told myself that if I pushed just a little, he'd finally wake up. He'd see what he was risking. It wasn't about cheating, not really. It was about proving something, that I could still get a reaction, that I wasn't invisible. The next week, Jordan texted me. He said he'd forgotten his jacket at our place, and I told him I'd bring it to him after work. Liam didn't question it when I mentioned it over dinner. He just said, "Okay." I hated how easily he said it. When I met Jordan, I made sure to look good. Not for him, but for the idea of being seen. We had coffee, talked about harmless things, but the energy between us was different now. He complimented my perfume, said Liam was lucky. I laughed and said Liam never noticed things like that anymore. Jordan said, "Maybe he needs a reason to." That night, I posted a photo of my coffee, a casual shot with Jordan's hand blurred in the corner. The caption read, "Good conversation always helps." I didn't tag him, but it didn't matter. People who knew us would recognize it. I wanted them to. I wanted Liam to. When I got home, he was on the couch reading. I asked how his day was. He said fine. I waited for him to bring up the post. He didn't. I finally asked if he'd seen it. He said, "I did." I said, "And?" He said, "You seem happy." I almost laughed. I'd wanted attention, and somehow his lack of jealousy made me feel more invisible than ever. That weekend, we were invited to a small gathering at a restaurant. Some of Liam's old work friends. Jordan would be there too. I told myself it was the perfect chance. I dressed carefully, spent an hour on my hair, made sure I looked the best I had in months. When we arrived, I could feel eyes on us. Liam was his usual calm self, polite, but distant. Jordan was charming as always. During dinner, I laughed at all of Jordan's jokes, touched his arm once when I leaned over to make a point. The table went quiet for a second, just long enough for me to feel it. Liam looked at me, not angry, not jealous, just tired. I asked him if he was okay. He said, "Yes." I said, "You look upset." He said, "I'm not." That made me furious. I told him he was pretending. He said, "You're performing." I froze. I didn't answer. When we got home, the air was heavy. I started talking fast, trying to fill the silence. I said I'd been joking, that maybe I'd gone too far, but I only did it because I missed how things used to be. He didn't say anything. He just took off his jacket, hung it up, and said, "You shouldn't need someone else to remind you who you are." Then he went to bed. I stood there in the kitchen, the clock ticking too loud. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I wanted to believe this would blow over. I told myself he'd cool down and come to me, that we'd talk it out like always. The next morning, he was gone. His things were still there, but his car wasn't. On the kitchen counter sat his wedding ring, next to a folded note. It said, "You don't test love by breaking it." I stared at that note for hours, replaying every word I'd said, every fake laugh I'd forced. It didn't feel like power anymore. It felt like something had snapped, not loud, not violent, just final. I told myself he was overreacting. I told myself he'd be back, but deep down I already knew. This time I'd tested the wrong thing. The apartment felt different after he left. Not messy or broken, just still. His toothbrush was still in the bathroom, his jacket on the chair, his favorite mug on the counter. It almost felt like he was still there until I realized how quiet it was. I tried to tell myself it was temporary. He'd cool off, come back, we'd laugh about how dramatic everything had gotten. But 3 days passed and there was no message, no call, no note. At first I refused to look desperate. I went to work, smiled at my students, told coworkers everything was fine. When they asked about Liam, I said he was staying with a friend because of a project. I made it sound casual, like it was my idea. At lunch, one of the younger teachers said she'd seen a post of Jordan's, a photo of him hiking, the same trail Liam used to love. She asked if we'd all gone together. I said no, and something in her expression made me feel small. That afternoon, I decided to get ahead of the story. I posted a picture of myself with a caption, Sometimes you have to remind yourself that peace is better than perfection. Within minutes, comments rolled in. Some supportive, some curious. A few even asked if Liam and I were okay. I replied vaguely, saying we were working through things. It felt powerful, controlling the narrative. But that power faded quickly when I realized Liam wasn't reacting at all. He'd deactivated his accounts entirely. My mother called that night. She'd heard from someone that Liam had left. She sounded more amused than worried. She said, "He's sulking. Men hate losing control." I said, "He's not angry, he's cold." She told me that was worse, that I needed to get in front of it, make him remember what he was walking away from. She said, "Post something nice with that friend of his. It'll get under his skin." I laughed, said it was a ridiculous idea, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day, I texted Jordan. I said I was tired of the awkwardness and wanted to talk. He agreed, but reluctantly. We met for coffee near my school, a quiet place where no one from work would see. I told him I hadn't meant for things to go this far, that I just wanted to get my marriage back to how it was. He said softly, "You've made that hard." I asked if Liam had talked to him. He said he had, briefly. I pushed for details, but Jordan wouldn't give any. Instead, he said, "Maybe you should let him breathe." I said, "He's been breathing for years. Maybe that's the problem." We talked for a while longer, but it wasn't easy. Jordan kept glancing at his phone, uncomfortable. I decided to lean into the tension, to remind him that I wasn't the villain people thought. When we got up to leave, I smiled and took a quick selfie, us standing close, coffee cups in hand. I posted it later with a caption, "Grateful for real friends." It worked faster than I expected. My mother texted with a winking emoji. My friends started commenting heart emojis. One even wrote, "He must be regretting everything now." But not everyone was supportive. My sister Nina sent a single text, "You're embarrassing yourself." I didn't reply. That evening, I came home to a different kind of silence. Something was off. I checked the bedroom. His clothes were gone. Half the drawers were empty. Panic set in fast. I opened the closet, the bathroom cabinet, everywhere, half empty, half gone. My phone buzzed with a notification from our shared bank account. Access restricted. Please contact your financial advisor. I called him right away. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a message. "We need to talk. This is insane." Still nothing. I told myself he was punishing me, that he wanted me to squirm. I told myself that meant he still cared. The next morning I went to my parents' house. My mother greeted me like nothing was wrong. My father was sitting at the kitchen table reading the paper. I told them what had happened, expecting sympathy. My mother rolled her eyes and said, "He's being childish." My father didn't look up. He said, "No, he's being decisive." I snapped that he was taking Liam's side. He said quietly, "I'm taking the side of anyone who's done being tested." I stormed out of the kitchen before I started crying. That night, Jordan called. His voice was careful. He said Liam had reached out, that he'd been to see a lawyer. My stomach dropped. I said, "He wouldn't." Jordan said, "He already did." He told me Liam wanted to make things official. I asked what that meant, but Jordan wouldn't say more. Before hanging up, he said, "Maribel, maybe it's time to stop pushing." I barely slept. Every sound in the apartment felt louder. My own heartbeat felt like an accusation. I tried to tell myself this was all temporary, that Liam was just trying to scare me into apologizing, but a part of me knew it wasn't that simple anymore. The next morning, an email arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Notice of Legal Representation, Liam Dorsey." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a polite but formal statement outlining the beginning of financial separation. It mentioned documentation of marital misconduct. I closed the laptop and stared at the blank wall in front of me. My mother said it was bluffing. My father said it was a warning. I didn't know who to believe. All I knew was that I'd wanted a reaction, and now I had one. Just not the kind I could control. I couldn't stop replaying the phrase marital misconduct. It sounded so formal, like something that belonged to strangers, not me, not us. I told myself the lawyer was exaggerating, that Liam was just trying to scare me into an apology. Still, I couldn't shake the image of him sitting across from someone in a suit, calmly explaining how I'd humiliated him. The thought made me both angry and terrified. I decided I needed to get ahead of it. Again. My mother said I should post something soft, something that made me look like the one who wanted peace. She said, "People always side with whoever looks sadder." So I posted an old photo of Liam and me at the beach, smiling in the sunset. The caption read, "Love is work. Sometimes people forget that." The reaction was fast. Comments flooded in. People asking what happened, others offering advice. I told myself I was shaping the story. But then I saw Nina's comment. "Stop acting like the victim. You played with him until he broke." I deleted it immediately, but not before a few people liked it. That night, I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling, feeling like the whole world was whispering. The next day, I went to see my mother. She was cheerful, convinced that I just needed to stay calm. "He'll come around," she said. "Men get their pride hurt, then they crawl back." My father was less kind. He looked up from his newspaper and said, "He's not hurt. He's done." I told him he didn't understand. He said, "You tested a man who doesn't play games. You lost." I left before he could say more. I couldn't stand the idea that Liam was controlling the story, so I decided to reach out to Jordan. I told myself I just wanted clarity, but really, I wanted someone to blame. When he answered, he sounded nervous. I said, "You've been talking to him, haven't you?" He said, "He's my friend, Maribel." I told him he was supposed to be our friend. He sighed and said, "You dragged me into something you shouldn't have." I said it wasn't my fault, that he could have stopped me. He said quietly, "You didn't want to be stopped." I hung up before he could say anything else. By evening, I was furious. I decided to post again, this time a video. I sat in front of the window, soft light behind me, trying to look fragile. I said I was tired of being blamed for wanting connection. I said, love should be about effort from both sides, that silence can hurt more than anger. It sounded rehearsed even as I said it. I uploaded it anyway. Within an hour, it had hundreds of views, and most of the comments weren't kind. "You humiliated your husband," one said. "Now you want sympathy?" said another. A third read, "Classic manipulation. Own it." I turned off notifications, but the words stuck. I started scrolling through them at midnight, one after another, until they blurred into one long accusation. I threw my phone across the couch and cried, not because of what they said, but because it was exactly what I'd tried to avoid. People seeing the truth before I did. 2 days later, I got another message from the law firm. This time, it wasn't just an email. A courier came to my door with a large envelope. Inside was a formal request for a deposition, my own messages attached as evidence, text to Jordan, screenshots of my posts, even the caption from the beach photo. Every line felt like it was shouting, "You did this." I called my mother in a panic. She told me to breathe, that it was all just legal theater. She said, "He won't really go through with it. He still loves you." I wanted to believe her. But when I called Liam's number again, it went straight to voicemail. Not disconnected, just ignored. Later that evening, I drove to Jordan's apartment without telling anyone. He looked surprised when he opened the door. I told him we needed to talk. He said, "About what?" "It's over, Maribel." I said, "You started this with me. You don't get to disappear now." He shook his head. "No, you started it. I just didn't stop you soon enough." His voice was calm, like Liam's used to be. That calmness drove me crazy. I said, "You're both cowards. Neither of you can handle a woman who isn't scared to push back. He just said, "You pushed too far." Then he closed the door. When I got back to my car, I sat there shaking, not from anger but from something else. The realization that everyone around me was stepping away, Liam, Jordan, even Nina, who'd stopped replying to my messages. I'd wanted attention, and now I had the wrong kind. The kind that felt like pity. That night, I stayed at my mother's house again. She told me to ignore the lawyers until things calmed down. My father said calmly, "They won't. He's not bluffing." When I snapped at him, he said, "You should start preparing." I asked what that meant. He said, "You're about to learn what happens when a quiet man decides he's had enough." I didn't want to believe him. I told myself Liam wasn't the type to follow through, that he was too gentle, too rational. But the next morning, when I checked my email, there it was, an official notice confirming the deposition date, signed by both lawyers. I sat at the table staring at the screen, my mother's voice echoing in the background, telling me it would blow over. It wouldn't. I knew it now. Liam wasn't trying to scare me anymore. He was erasing me, carefully, legally, and with the same quiet I once mistook for weakness. The law office didn't look like the kind of place where love stories ended. It was quiet, sleek, filled with glass and polished wood. The receptionist smiled too politely when she said my name. I told myself this was just a formality, that Liam couldn't actually want to go through with it. He wasn't cruel, just wounded. Once he saw me in person, maybe we could talk. Maybe he'd remember how things used to feel. When I walked into the conference room, he was already there. He didn't look angry or sad. He looked calm, the same quiet calm that had always frustrated me. There was a man sitting beside him, his lawyer, who nodded at me like I was a stranger. My own lawyer whispered that I should keep my answers brief and not interrupt. I barely listened. They started reading things, formal phrases about documentation and statements. Then they pulled out folders. Inside were copies of messages I'd sent to Jordan, some I didn't even remember typing. Things like, "He's too calm. I'll make him react, and if he won't show emotion, I'll find someone who will." They even had screenshots of my posts, every caption that had made me feel clever and in control. My lawyer said I could dispute context, but context didn't matter anymore. The words were mine. Then they showed photos, the one of me and Jordan at the restaurant, the one from the coffee shop, and a few more, pictures I hadn't known existed, taken by people we both knew. In every single one, Liam was in the background, silent, watching. I felt my stomach twist. I tried to speak. I said those were jokes, that I just wanted to make things exciting again. Liam's lawyer asked, "At whose expense?" I didn't answer. I glanced at Liam, but he didn't look back. His hands were folded neatly on the table, like he was listening to a meeting at work. I said, "You're really doing this?" He said, "You already did." My throat felt dry. I wanted to cry, but I didn't want them to see it. My lawyer stepped in, said we could discuss potential settlements privately. I hated that word, settlements. It made it sound like I was being bought off. I said I didn't want his money. Liam said, "Good, you won't be getting any." That tone, calm, polite, factual, hurt more than yelling would have. He wasn't trying to punish me. He was just done. The conversation moved forward like I wasn't even there. My lawyer discussed property, accounts, documents. I sat staring at the table, thinking about the night I'd laughed with Jordan and how proud I'd felt when people looked at us. It felt so far away now, like a dream I should have woken up from sooner. After it was over, my lawyer told me we'd have to wait for the judge's approval. She said, "It's cleaner this way." Cleaner. I nodded but didn't move. Liam was packing up his papers, still not looking at me. I said, "Can we talk alone?" He said, "No need." I said, "You can't just erase me." He said, "I'm not erasing you, I'm letting go." Then he left. When I got home, I found my mother sitting at the table. She'd heard from my father. He'd spoken to someone who knew Liam's lawyer. She said it was all an act, that men like him always came crawling back once the drama faded. I told her this wasn't drama. She didn't believe me. My father came in and said quietly, "You've lost more than a husband. You've lost the story." I told him he was cruel. He said, "No, Maribel, I'm honest." That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the floor, surrounded by papers. I read the official words again: irretrievable breakdown, conduct unbecoming, loss of trust. They sounded clinical, like a diagnosis. I wondered if they'd ever loved each other at all, or if I'd just imagined it. I opened my laptop and scrolled through old photos of us. Trips, birthdays, lazy mornings. Every picture told a version of me that didn't exist anymore. The girl who smiled easily, who thought affection meant possession. I typed a message to Liam, something small. "I never meant to hurt you." I deleted it before sending. At midnight, I checked social media again. Someone had shared a screenshot from my video, the one where I cried. The caption read, "When playing the victim doesn't work anymore." I closed the app and threw my phone across the couch. For the first time, I understood why Liam had chosen silence. It wasn't weakness, it was protection. The next morning, I met with my lawyer again. She said quietly, "It's almost over." I nodded. I asked her if Liam had said anything at all. She looked at me for a moment, then said, "He just wants peace." That word again. Peace. The same word I'd once used in my captions like it was something easy, fashionable. Now it sounded like something earned, something I'd never get back. That evening, when I came home, there was another envelope under the door. It was from the same law office. Inside was a single sheet of paper, settlement finalized, agreement filed. Underneath, in Liam's handwriting, a note: "Please stop making me your lesson." I sat on the kitchen floor, holding it in my hands. For the first time, I couldn't think of a caption, couldn't shape it into something that made me look right. It was just quiet, plain truth, and it didn't care who was watching. The day of the final hearing felt unreal. The courthouse was colder than I expected, all gray walls and quiet footsteps. I'd imagined something dramatic, maybe even cinematic. Tears, arguments, a sudden reconciliation. Instead, it felt like waiting in line for paperwork. My lawyer told me to stay composed, that we were almost done. I wanted to believe her, but every sound, the clicking pens, the shuffling papers, felt like an ending. When Liam arrived, he looked the same as always, calm, pressed shirt, no expression. He didn't glance at me. I told myself it was his way of hiding hurt, that if I pushed just a little more, he'd finally break. I kept waiting for him to show emotion, anger, regret, anything. But he stayed still. That stillness was unbearable. The judge started reading through the file, her voice flat and factual. She summarized the case, mentioned the pattern of public humiliation, the evidence of emotional provocation. Each phrase hit harder than the last. I wanted to object, to say they made it sound so cold. I wanted to say I hadn't meant for it to become a spectacle, that I'd only wanted him to care. My lawyer squeezed my arm, whispering that speaking now would only hurt me. Then Liam's lawyer began. He laid out the story like a timeline, precise and calm. The dinner with Jordan, the posts, the photos, the messages. He said Liam had tried to salvage things quietly, but Mrs. Dorsey's continued public actions made reconciliation impossible. I felt my face burn. I said softly, "That's not true." But no one looked up. When they played the voicemail, my voice sharp and shaky, accusing him of never loving me enough, I wanted to disappear. When it was Liam's turn to speak, he didn't sound angry. He just said, "I tried to make things work. I thought if I was patient, she'd stop testing me. But it never stopped. I don't hate her. I just don't want to live like that." The judge asked if he believed the marriage was over. He said, "It ended when it became a game." Those words hit harder than I expected. My throat closed up, but I forced myself to speak when my lawyer signaled. I said I was sorry if he'd misunderstood my intentions. I said I'd only been trying to save the connection. The judge asked if I took responsibility for my actions. I said, I regret how it looked. She paused before writing something down, and I knew that wasn't the answer she wanted. Liam's lawyer passed papers across the table. My lawyer reviewed them, signed, and handed me the pen. I hesitated. It felt like signing away proof that I'd ever mattered. I looked up at Liam, hoping for some hesitation from him, but he was already standing. He signed his name neatly, then said to the room, not to me, "Thank you." Then he turned to leave. I called out his name. He stopped, just for a second, then looked back. His eyes were calm, steady, unreadable. I said, "Can't we just talk?" He said, "We've been talking for years. You just called it love." Then he walked out, the door closing softly behind him. The room was silent, except for the faint scratch of the judge's pen. My lawyer whispered that it was done. I sat still, staring at the empty chair across from me. I wanted to run after him, to say he'd misunderstood, that it was supposed to be a test of love, not the end of it. But there was nothing left to test. Outside the courthouse, the sun was too bright. My mother called, asking how it went. I said, "It's over." She said, "He'll come back eventually." I didn't answer. She didn't understand. This wasn't a fight. It was a funeral, one that had no guests and no eulogy. When I got home, there was a small box on my doorstep. I knew it was from him before I even saw his handwriting. Inside was a folded note and a few things: my wedding ring, a framed photo from our honeymoon, and a pair of earrings he'd once bought me. The note said, "You can keep what's yours. I just want my peace." I sat on the floor holding that note, reading it over and over. I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't. He hadn't shouted, hadn't sought revenge. He'd simply walked away. And somehow, that was the cruelest thing of all. The first week after the divorce was silent. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, the kind that hums in your ears and makes you aware of every sound you make. I tried to stay busy. I cleaned, cooked, rearranged furniture, opened and closed drawers just to hear something move. Nothing helped. The apartment still smelled faintly of him. His soap, his cologne, that calm scent that had once made me feel safe and now made me feel sick. People online had stopped talking about us by then. The comments on my old posts slowed until they vanished. My followers moved on to someone else's drama. I thought I'd feel relieved when the attention faded, but it only made the emptiness louder. I tried to post again, a photo of my morning coffee with the caption, "New Beginnings." It got 5 likes. I deleted it within an hour. My mother called every day at first. She kept saying, "You just need to give him time. He'll realize what he's lost." I didn't have the energy to argue. My father didn't call at all. When I finally visited, he looked at me for a long time before saying, "You thought testing love would prove it, but real love doesn't survive experiments." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I'd only wanted honesty, but even I didn't believe that anymore. At night, I kept thinking about the last thing Liam said in court, that we'd been talking for years. I'd just called it love. I replayed that line again and again until I started whispering it out loud, trying to make it sound less final. It didn't work. A few days later, I went through the box he'd left on the doorstep. The wedding ring glinted at the bottom, smaller than I remembered. The honeymoon photo showed us sitting by the water, both smiling, both pretending the world was easy. I ran my fingers over his handwriting on the note. "I just want my peace." That word again. Peace. The thing I'd claimed to want but never let either of us have. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, staring at the lights outside. I told myself he would call eventually, that curiosity or guilt or nostalgia would bring him back. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't. His silence wasn't about pride anymore. It was about closure. He'd made peace with losing me long before I realized I'd lost him. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a walk. The air was cold, sharp. I passed the coffee shop where Jordan and I had met that day. It was almost empty. For a second, I thought about going in, but I kept walking. There was nothing left to say to anyone. When I got home, I sat on the couch and opened my phone. My finger hovered over Liam's number. I typed a message, "Can we talk?" Then I deleted it. I typed again, "I'm sorry." Deleted that too. I realized there was nothing I could send that wouldn't sound like another performance. As the day went on, I cleaned the apartment again. Slower this time, not to fill the silence but to make it livable. When I reached the kitchen counter, I found the small folded note I'd left there the day he walked out. The one that said, "You don't test love by breaking it." I hadn't thrown it away. I picked it up and read it again, feeling something strange. Not guilt exactly, not grief either, but recognition. I used to think love was something you measured by reactions, the jealousy, the attention, the fire. I thought if I could make him feel something, even anger, it meant we still had something real. Now I understood. His calm hadn't been indifference. It had been the kind of patience that eventually runs out. That night, I poured another glass of wine and sat by the window again. The city outside looked the same as always, but I felt smaller somehow, like a background character in a life I'd already ruined. I whispered, almost to myself, "It was just a test." The words sounded pathetic in the quiet. I waited, as if silence could answer me. It didn't. It never had. And that, I finally understood, was the point. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching,